humans have submitted a load of questions via our YouTube and social medias. And I have to say that there's several thoughts, apart from the fact that you're very honest.
You're very honest.
Very honest about your toys in the bedroom and various other things. But actually, there's a fair amount of recorded pain would be what strikes me from these questions.
And that's something that has come up over the years that we've been broadcasting, and you guys, our audience who are so loyal and faithful and have commented on things, we've seen that there's a need or there are questions out there from people, and that's partly what prompted us to put together this second series.
So can I ask you, Nigel and Louise Reid, as church ministers for many decades, how many people do you think you've married? I know I've just put you on the spot.
Well, because we were never in a denominational environment, therefore we were only ever marrying our own people per se. And in Ireland, it had certain dynamics to it anyway. 20 couples.
Yeah. And that's quite a lot of hours of pre-marriage preparation.
Yeah.
And similarly for us, we tend to marry our own because of the church structure that we're in. And then the sense of how many marriages have you counselled?
Oh, that's a different story altogether.
It feels endless.
It is. I mean, marriage stuff is a huge part of the pastoral ministry. And Louise and I were in that for 25 years. More, probably 30 years, because even before we were full-time in it. And marriage is one of the huge issues for the pastoral ministry, isn't it?
Ongoing.
Yeah. Yes. And that's partly why we're here together, because you kind of glean best practice. Now, we are not therapists.
No.
We are not you're a deeper healing expert, Louise, but the rest of us are not so much. And this is just the rough and tumble of things we have learnt over many years of having to be a solution to the congregations that we love.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been in full-time pastoral ministry, but we're not full-time professional marriage counsellors or therapists.
Yeah.
So what we offer here is our best experience, our biblical wisdom, our own life experience, what we've gleaned from other leaders and knowledge around that.
Yes. So in these episodes, we are going to look at sex. We are going to look at conflict management. We are looking at our differences, the differences between men and women. And we are looking at conflict resolution, maturing love. So we've set ourselves quite a trajectory to journey on together. But as you sit with us for this first episode, we want to spend the next few moments together, maybe as long as an hour, looking at good foundations. And as we begin, although you might have been married for many years, the good foundations, you are never too old to start to look at them. And if you never had proper marriage prep and that was missing from your life, an awful lot of people say to me, oh, I had no marriage prep. So I'm like, well, did you not talk about this? Is this
with your minister, your pastor, whoever's married?
Did you not read a book? Did you not put in some stones to stand on that would anchor you? Or did you not, what did you read in the scripture? And the answer is very often no, or it was so inadequate, a bit like pastoral ministry, inadequate often for the actual job you end up doing.
Very much so. I suppose we had good pre-marriage with friends of ours, actually, and quite a few evenings with them, and we even look back on that now, and it's so helpful.
Yeah. Did you have marriage prep?
We had some.
A little.
What we did have then conversations following marriage, which was useful, just with the pastor, because we'd moved house to a new place, got a new pastor, and so we had some of that, but not a formal course for that. Yeah, although we obviously had Emma's father around as well, so there was a kind of ongoing.
Yeah. So it was a bit
we
more
had an
organic.
opportunity of dialogue.
My father was particularly gifted at marriage stuff.
Good.
Just had an instinct for it, and actually read prolifically, because back in those days, remember in Christendom when divorce was really like, and then he had to teach on the biblical reasons for divorce, which we will come to, because he was hitting it as divorce was on the rise within the Christian psyche. Yeah. So, and the understanding of that. So he was particularly skilled.
I think Emma as well as formal pre-marriage, there's also possibly a need in the body of Christ for post-marriage counselling, because the things you can do in the weeks leading up. It's a little bit like your preparation for having children. You can go through all that birthing prep, but actually it's then in the weeks and the months after you've
I
got
mean,
the
has
child.
anybody ever stuck to a birthing plan that you've ever known? No.
And similarly, when you're thinking, you're getting so prepared for the big day and everything around the wedding, that actually, are you fully 100% thinking about it? But as soon as you're back from honeymoon, the rubber hits the road, then actually it's probably useful to have something going on.
Okay, let's talk about good foundations, and we will open this up. I would want to start by saying this: life, this is a quote, life is the quality of your relationships. It's not about what you've done for a career, how much money you have in the bank, and all those other markers, but it is the quality of your relationships. And life moves at the speed of your relationships. If your relationships are stuck or in trauma, your life is going at that speed. If your relationships are flourishing, your life is going at the flourishing speed. So life moves at the speed of your relationships. And relationships, third quote, third sentence, are the quality of their conversations. Worth going again. Life is the quality of your relationships. Life moves at the speed of your relationships, and relationships are the quality of their conversations.
So these are things that if you were reflecting or looking back on, you would analyze, because I think in the moment you might not necessarily say that. You say, "Oh, I'm doing great," but when you look back and you think, actually, those times when I felt at my best, or I really was flying, or the things I was proud of in life were when relationships were in a good place, or I had good, healthy relationships.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's start with there are 5 questions that I always actually ask when we are doing marriage prep, or even when we're doing marriage counselling. And it is the question, what do you love about each other? And it doesn't matter whether you're 37 years married or 26 years married. It is the need to understand and to chat about, what do you love about each other? It has to be verbalized. It has to be understood. It has to be spoken to each other in a conversation. You don't need to do it every single day of your life, but there is a sense of a knowing that there is a love that binds and that and that creates covenant, and that there is a covenant. You'll come to that in a moment. But what do you love about each other? Let's talk about why that matters.
I think particularly as time goes by, the things that drew you together 37 years ago as early 20s, those things change with the journey of time, but there's fundamentals that never change.
Yeah.
And it's to understand the fundamentals that never change and realize other parts will change. And so, there's things about Louise that I always love, but there's also things about Louise that have changed dramatically from what I first loved.
Yes.
And so you're always, that's always an interesting thing.
But staying in the appreciation.
Yeah.
And, I think that even learning to make it an intentional thing to voice the appreciation.
Yes.
And very important, it's not like, thanks for doing whatever it is.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting out the bins. It's not that kind of appreciation. It's the appreciation of, I love your kindness in thinking about that and acting on it, and the qualities that one another have, reminding the other, because I think that's something that needs to stay in place permanently all through life. In fact, being intentional about it, we went through a phase. It was a bit of torture for you, wasn't it, really?
It really was.
Nigel likes to be a little bit more spontaneous, but I was like, every night we need to say 2 things to each other that we really appreciate about one another.
You actually did.
Oh, yeah.
Look,
you say it's torture.
To all the men out there, when you're put on the spot, what do you most appreciate about me? And you're like, rabbits and headlights for most men.
That is
but actually you
hilarious.
begin
That's why
to
you have to
then
do it,
really start to work with it.
Yeah.
And I think also the reality is there are some people, and I'm not going to say it's wives or husbands, it's just some people who the appreciation is a huge part of the expression of love. And for others, it simply isn't.
It's not so much a big deal.
It's not such a big deal.
So the question of what do you love, and then the second question of what works.
Yes.
Because every marriage has something that doesn't work. I mean, it's just what it is. But what I find whenever we have sat with people, even in quite significant crisis, is that if you are able to remember those
Correct.
memorial stones of what works and what do you love, you actually dissipate the fever pitch of the crisis. Because you're going, we are not as on the edge or as in pain or as desperately awful. It doesn't minimize. Sometimes there's some awful things that happen in marriage, but you're giving yourself the place of a possibility of a breakthrough because you are putting the right stone in place, which is really the remembrance of what you love and what works.
And it's not just remembering and calling to mind and speaking out characteristics, also memories of great times that you had together, maybe a specific holiday or a celebration or whatever, and recalling the memories, because what it does, it reimagines it in our beings, and it's almost like we're back there again. Very important, because then it medicates and brings down the level. Oh, maybe we're not in so much difficulty as we thought we were, because we're remembering what the foundations are.
We actually had, because we have asked for permission to tell some stories, but we will anonymize. We actually had somebody not that long ago sitting with you and I who had come. I mean, it was one of those shoehorned into the diary. Everybody's a bit overwrought, but because it was such a life crisis, and they're sitting with us in this house, and it's life crisis. And you can see that I want my space to do the other one down. I want to say how I've been wronged. I want, my spotlight of my verbal diatribe against. And I'm like, you are only allowed to tell me what you love about each other and what works. And you could see don't you make me sit in something so banal. Don't you force me into something so lightweight. I want my right to say I'm wounded. And I just wouldn't let them. It's like, no, stay with it. And I knew I was being an irritant to them. And they were like, but the sense of like the discipline of what do you love and what works, and you watch their entire body language just go, oh, this is not what I thought it was. Do you want to comment on that situation, David?
Yeah, I think I know from as a young man when we got married that I wasn't naturally someone who expressed emotions or verbally affirmed. And so the discipline of thinking about what I valued, of writing it down, actually, because we did that before we got married. It was, we wrote down what we liked about each other, what we valued about each other. And that discipline, setting that out from a start, forcing me to go against the grain of young man, where it was there was all the physicality and the lust and the pursuit, and actually, but going back a step and putting in the discipline and the formality of what I like and what I value about a person, and then making that something that you regularly go back to, was something that stood us in good stead going forwards.
And back to that quote that the relationships are only as good as the quality of their conversations.
Yeah. And that's an art form in itself. But we've got to cut ourselves a little slack.
Yeah.
It's something that we need to grow into. And if it hasn't been modeled to us, good conversation and and really to broaden that, it's really good communication, because it's more than words. It's how we communicate on lots of different levels, in physicality, in movement, in expression, in all of that. It's so important. And if it hasn't been modeled to us, we'll then go find some good models of it.
Yes. Let's talk about covenant, and to understand what happens when marriage before God is instituted, begun, and the importance of covenant as a foundational understanding. Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really vital that we understand that, particularly in our society today, because actually, even now, marriage is probably the one thing that society as a whole will talk about at some level as a covenant.
Yes.
As distinct, I mean, it's not something in Western society we use very much, but we still talk about the marriage covenant, even if they're not godly people. But covenant is a God thing. It is his idea. He made it with he made 6 covenants with man, even though actually most of them are with an individual, be it Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, whatever. So this thing that we have made a covenant before God is God's idea. And I was just thinking about this last night and sitting around a bit thinking about it. And of course, the major thing that came to me was that, first of all, it's not a contract.
Very important.
Covenant and contract are entirely different things. And in some senses, society sometimes tries to bring marriage back to a contract. So now I can break the contract of marriage by going to a lawyer and getting it divorced and whatever. But that's different to the covenant. And of course, with God, the covenant was a whole of being thing. I mean, it's very interesting that in Scripture we talk about cutting a covenant. So Abraham cut a covenant with Abimelech. Because there's something of our very being that's going into a covenant that's not into a contract. With a contract, you've got a set of headings, and you agree to those headings, and if you break those headings, the contract is broken. It's not that simple when you've made a covenant before God between two people. It's not a case of going, bum, 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 well, that's over, and therefore we get rid of it.
And the need, therefore, to almost lay hands on your own head, as a married person watching this, to pull out contractual thinking. I do this, you do that. And so well, what is the difference? And what is a covenant versus the contract of you and me, and you do that, I do this is what I get, this is what you take, this is what, and that sort of ugliness, and we would want to say contractual ugliness rather than covenantal brilliance. And these are foundation stones.
Because this is an oath. It's a matter of the heart. It's spirit, soul, body. It's the whole of us. It is not something that we can just stick in a logical mind and have on a piece of paper. Although there are some levels where that is included, but it is so much wider. It's so much bigger. It is the greatest expression on earth that we have of God's commitment to man and of the relationship within the Godhead. It's so deep, it's so wide, it's so profound that I don't think we actually really understand it. And going into a marriage, I don't think we ever think about those things particularly.
And I think it was brought home to me particularly. So, you know, you've said it earlier, married probably 20 couples, you're standing at the front of church, you know, you have a fairly standard thing you go through because everyone wants it and whatever. And I've done that as a pastor for many years. But Louise has a great story, which she can tell now in a moment, about one of the times we did this outdoors in Spain, one of the perks of the job, flown over to Spain to marry a couple.
People,
And I needed help holding the papers because the wind was blowing. Do you want to talk about that story,
Louise?
Louise?
This is so important, and why it's so important is that God is for marriage, and covenant matters to him hugely. And if you go for a church wedding, you'll have the first lines usually are, as Jesus was
at a wedding
in Cana of Galilee, blah, blah, blah. And it's rattled off. And, you know, I've heard it 1,000 times, we all have, until one specific time where I was actually up the front with Nigel because he would be the one marrying the couple. And the presence of God was so strong, I was completely, overwhelmed. And I said to him, is it always like this? And he was like what? I said, but do you realize when it says that Jesus is now present here by his Spirit, the sense, it's like when you make that covenant, heaven agrees. Heaven is behind marriage and behind your covenant and behind the promise that you're making, because heaven loves binding promises of faithfulness and longevity. Heaven is after this and putting its weight church behind you. So just even to remember your own weddings and think back and realize he was there and he was present with his seal of approval on covenant.
I think it's really important, this distinction between covenant and the kind of legal contract.
Yeah.
When we look at contracts in business and you're going into something, you're always checking through the clauses, saying, have we, and you're talking amongst each other, have we missed something? What? And you're thinking these what if scenarios, and but what if the other party does this? Right, we need a clause for that. Or what if have we worded this to cover all eventualities? A covenant is not like that. A covenant, you are completely all in. It's like you pour I don't know, red juice and blue juice into a cup to make a purple juice. You've done that. It is now mixed. You're all in. Everything is all in. You cannot separate out the components again. Whereas when you've got a contract in a drawer somewhere, it's always there as a reminder about little legalities or clauses or things that you can pick away at. No, if you are going in under God, who is eternal and unchanging, as a sign of his faithfulness, you are committing to a faithfulness to each other, and you're making that wholehearted 100% commitment. You're not holding anything back. You're not leaving anything in a prenuptial. You are putting everything, and you are saying, like the traditional vows are, all I have is yours, all yours is mine.
Yes, yeah.
Within
the love of God, Father,
Within
Son,
the
and
love of
Holy
God,
Spirit.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
we've all memorized the whole service.
And the whole sickness and in health. So we're saying in every situation, not apart from this clause or that clause. So it's a great way of thinking.
I do think it's why registry office weddings for me are a little bit problematic, though bless you if you had that done. Don't come
in some cultures,
condemnation.
You have to do that in Europe.
Yeah, there are some, but the sense of before God, there is a blessing that enacts the covenant. Now, let's get very practical, because a lot of that's quite theory, the conversation, but necessary understanding. What it does is it moves you from me, my, I, to us, are, we. And that is what covenant does. And you described it as the colours of the juice going together, which is helpful. But I find the first question, what do you love? The second question, what works? This next question of what will we promise to never say to each other, is this place of I'm understanding that I need to sit covenantally with a lifelong, preferably, unless you hit the biblical reasons for divorce, but I'm sitting with a lifelong expectation. And if I'm entering a covenant with a lifelong expectation, I'm going to want to agree that there are things we do not shoot at each other, because we are now an us. We are now a we. And I find that the big things in very practically is around bank accounts. And I know that there are business reasons why you might have separate bank accounts. I get that. But on the whole, my preference is no individual bank accounts, because as soon as you have an individual, my money, my bank account, you have lost all thought of the covenant of us or our or we, and it is seen most clearly a little bit in how we spend our time, but majoritively in this is mine. And that is it will put an erosion element, I promise you, into that covenant.
Correct.
It becomes equations or percentages. I put this percentage into this account, therefore I expect this out of it. No, you just don't get to say that. You're all in. Everything is all in. In
other words, a covenant before God is precious. It needs protected.
Yes.
And therefore we do the things that protect it, like and guard it. But we understand that it is easily bruised.
Absolutely.
And it's easily bruised if the practical things like the finances are not in place. So let's sit in the things we never say.
Yeah.
Because the covenant is easily bruised. So let's populate this. We have a list.
Well, going back to your quote about the relationship is based on the quality of conversation. This is about communication. Yeah. Because, you can easily just fall into saying something that you don't know is going to cause a problem or offense. So therefore, conversation, communication, and the ability then to know your own emotions, know your own responses, and to be able to instead of sucking it up, to be able to say, okay, let's agree that's a no-go zone, or that talking like that or using those words, we are not going to do that. And I think it's really important to remember that when you bruise your partner, you're not just bruising your partner, you're bruising the marriage. So you're actually bruising your union, you're bruising then by definition yourself as well. But these things are a little bit of trial and error. And every marriage is unique, so therefore everybody's got to work that out themselves. But particular criticisms are going to have to be off. You can't be doing that. I mean, there's critiquing, which is different than criticism.
What would you guys add in as we will never say?
I have to be honest with you and say that's been a fairly new thing for me to hear that. We just hadn't thought about that, to be honest.
Well, we would often say to one another, we're pretty robust.
Yeah.
We like the challenge.
Yeah.
But then what we need to be careful is that we don't let the challenge go too far, that it actually bruises.
Yeah.
We need to be careful, because
you probably have some things that you have maybe never agreed, but you just have not gone to.
Yeah.
You would not go to.
For
me, the word the word is the D word, divorce.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's not. Now we will.
Do you want me to leave? I'll divorce you. I'll separate.
That threat of if this doesn't happen, I'll divorce, or just it just is. It shouldn't even. It should be like there are certain swear words, curse words that I'm sure that many of you just
never say.
It's not in your vocabulary. It would never occur to you. Say you're not going to say it. You hear it in the world. It's just never past your lips, and it would never cross your mind, even in your most furious, or even if you had lost all your senses, it just wouldn't come out because you have so trained your mind, disciplined, you're just so full, it's not part of your vocabulary. And to me, for a covenant-believing Christian, it shouldn't be part of our vocabulary. Now, we'll discuss what happens in situations when it is required, but it should, this part of this so all in is that there are certain things that we just wouldn't talk about, and that would be one of them for me. If you were starting afresh, getting married together, just it's never a conversation, it's never a threat, it's never in the armory of things you might use in a situation.
Yeah.
I think it changes conflict management, which we'll come to in another episode, because if I've got these things of this is what works, this is what I love about you, this is what you love about me, that what it does is it creates a boxing ring, a safe parametered boxing ring for conflict. The conflict is then held within a boundaried space, and that has a safety, so that we're not going to fall out outside of a psychological safety space because we have agreed some things will not be said.
We hope you were blessed by that clip. And if you want to watch the full episode, head to Power TV today at www.powertv.app. It's our new place where we host all of our content, including prophecy, live broadcasts, teachings, worksheets, and more. Join us as we reveal the voice of God to the nations through life-changing and life-giving words from God. See you there.